Well, this might not be the most fun conversation, but I thought before we delve into how awful this is, I thought I could just read a brief background I wrote about what's been going on so people are caught up to speed. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. The gist of it is it looks like your license is getting taken away. But starting from the beginning, the College of Psychologists of Ontario, a regulatory board that was formed to monitor psychologists' relationships with their clients mainly, has been after you for, is it 3 years or is it longer than that?
It depends on the waves, but for this issue, it's been 3 or 4 years, yeah.
So working professionals like doctors, lawyers, massage therapists even, are all overseen by regulatory boards. What regulatory boards are supposed to do is give clients who've been basically abused by working professionals a place to go to complain to. What happened to you is a bunch of people who weren't your clients, random people online from all over the world, complained about a number of your tweets, as well as comments you made on Joe Rogan. The sorry not beautiful tweet in reference to a extremely obese swimsuit model, a tweet criticizing the government of Canada, a tweet saying that physicians removing women's breasts for being trans was criminal, and one, I thought, fairly entertaining tweet suggesting that this is the tweet that people online are saying you were inciting suicide, which honestly I think you'd have to have the IQ of a beetle in order to think that. But anyway.
So the quote in contention that she's talking about, I actually think Jordan Peterson was encouraging suicide, but how it goes is they're basically having a discussion on overpopulation. Jordan Peterson says, I don't think the world is overpopulated. The other guy says, well, actually, everything that I've read on it, whatever. He's basically saying that the world is overpopulated. And Jordan Peterson said, you're free to leave whenever you want. This is actually the standard quip against overpopulation. This is that you're free to solve the problem by one anytime that you want, because they have that in their hands. But I think it's especially hilarious that this is somehow contentious when the government of Canada is running the medical assistance in dying program all over the place.
You responded to someone who thought the world's population was too high and suggested that he should include himself in the depopulation he was already suggesting.
No, you said that you can leave at any time.
The college basically took all those complaints and decided that you pose a moderate risk.
But how can you not interpret that to mean that he should commit suicide? Obviously, it means he should commit suicide.
To the public. And I quote, the tweets were undermining public trust.
But yeah, this is just crazy that Peterson is getting investigated by this regulatory body, by this college of clinical psychologists or whatever it is, because of his tweets, because of and saying that he has to take social media training. I mean, this is just absurd.
Trust in the profession of psychology and trust in the college's ability to regulate the profession in the public interest. So completely ignoring the fact that one, morbid obesity should not be encouraged as it kills people. Removing your breasts and sterilizing yourself should not be encouraged. Right. And I'm not even sure why we'd have to explain that.
I mean, this is why he's really being investigated and harassed and attacked, is because he dares to speak the truth about the emperor's new clothes, that he dares to take this position contra the establishment on transgendered individuals, on lockdowns, because he dares to challenge the establishment consensus. That's why they're trying to take away his license and punish him for speaking out against the insanity that's going on in Ottawa.
Criticizing the government should be protected and sarcasm is a form of humor. They decided you have to undergo re-education, which you fought back against and lost, and appealed and lost because...
This is what the right to free speech is all about. That people should be able to say controversial things without being attacked by the state or by regulatory bodies that are working in conjunction with the state.
You never know. This time next year, man, it's pink hair and away we go on the radical leftist side. Converted
Yeah.
completely. No, you don't think
Okay.
so?
I don't think so. So that's,
These guys are so cute.
I guess we could start with like, how are you feeling about all this?
I think you were insulting to Beatles. What have they ever done to you, Michaela? Okay, anyways.
Yeah. So are you okay?
It's tiring. You know, like I'm preparing for this tour. I have I'm finishing 2 books. They're very complicated. They take pretty much all my attention, and having to fight this war, well, it's tiring. You know, I have to plot, strategize, write, watch my tongue, consider my next best move. And I also have to face the dismal reality.
Moving on, we've got the Wicked Witch of the North.
This is the third cabinet retreat, at least in a row, where you've said that affordability and housing prices and inflation are sort of your key topics of conversation. A year later, at least, with 3 cabinet retreats, Canadians don't seem to be buying whatever message you're selling on it. Why are Canadians not believing that your government has the solutions?
Last question.
You're right. This has been an incredibly challenging economic period. And it's one of the things we've spoken about. And I think all of us need to step back a little bit and look at the economic roller coaster our country and all of us have been through, adding an energy shock to that. As a result of these supply chain shocks, of the energy shock, we had high inflation. And then the next shoe to drop.
Oh, sure. It was the supply chain shock and the oil shock, not the decade-long policy of 0% interest rates. You guys fell for one of the classic delusions, the idea that you can just create wealth by printing money. It doesn't work, and now Canadians are suffering the consequence of these dubious monetary policies.
More shocks than I have shoes. But the next was then high interest rates in response to high inflation. So I don't think it is at all surprising that Canadians are exhausted, that Canadians have economic whiplash. It has been a really hard time. And
Not for you.
it has been one thing after another.
It has been a hard time. It's been a hard time for ordinary Canadians because the economy has stagnated over the last decade. GDP per capita is the same today as it was 10 years ago. Because we've had these policies of runaway government spending, inflationary deficits fueled by borrowing money from the banking system, giveaways to foreign corporations like Volkswagen, all in the name of green energy. Meanwhile, domestically, it takes 20, 30 years just to get a mining project started because of all the red tape and regulatory reviews, environmental reviews, First Nation reviews. It's basically impossible to get any actual economic activity going in Canada. You've got a prime minister and a deputy prime minister that are hostile to the oil sector. You know, they sabotaged the Kinder Morgan pipeline and then took it over themselves. It's now cost taxpayers $30 billion. The thing's still not done. The growth of government is out of control in this country. Government spending is almost half of the economy.
One unprecedented in the lifetime, of certainly a person who didn't live through the First World War. One unprecedented shock after another.
Tucker Carlson recently came to Canada, had a great discussion. Let's get into it.
Do you predict is going to happen in this political year in that country?
Thank you. I couldn't be more grateful to be an American. I've always felt that way. As I said My dad's family was from Nova Scotia. They left at the time of the American Revolution because they didn't want to be free, so they fled to the Maritimes. And just kidding. But anyway, then they came back. Ultimately, many are still there. Their name is Refuse. I think they're liberal. But I have always been grateful for my birthright as an American and for the God-given rights that are protected by my government officially in the Bill of Rights, which is a beautiful document, the greatest document we've ever produced, and that no other country has. So, and I will feel that way till I die. And unlike a lot of people in our leadership class, I have no plans to go anywhere else. I've got too many children and too many dogs. And
It's actually important to specify God-given rights as opposed to rights that are given to you from the government. Because if the government gives you your rights, they can take them away. But if the rights are given by God, or if we have natural rights that are discernible through the use of one's reason, right? Simply through lived experience, we can determine that we have specific rights simply by living our lives and recognizing what it feels like when we're victimized, right? When if a child steals another child's cookie, that child cries. The child that had their cookie stolen, So even as children, we recognize the right to property. We recognize what it feels like to have our property rights infringed upon by another. And likewise, if you're assaulted, we recognize that this creates like a really negative reaction in us. So we can sort of infer from that people shouldn't assault each other, that people shouldn't steal each other's stuff, that we have the right to own property, we have the right to be free from assault.
I'm dying there. But I'm definitely very concerned, and I can't see the outcome of this year clearly at all. I was thinking yesterday, it really is like looking through a shower curtain. You see these opaque shapes lurking, but you can't tell if they're, friend or foe, nude or clothed. You don't really know what you're looking at. But you know that there is a collision coming between titanic forces, the population of America versus its leaders. And it's coming to a head because of the structure of this election. And so you have the Republican candidate, and he is going to be the candidate, whose election is the one thing
that he is. It was pretty much ordained from the beginning of the primary process. I mean, he had 50-digit polling lead on DeSantis.
Well, I think it's
50 point, not digit.
I think
that'd be a hell of a lead.
It's kind of determined, and of course it's politics, so it's filled with all sorts of. The amount of ugliness display beneath the surface in all politics.
I don't really get Trump fans. Like, I don't see what there is to be excited about. He's crass. He's a moron. He doesn't have coherent policies. I see the entertainment value, but I don't understand people that like enthusiastically support Trump. Like, yeah, that's my guy,
It's everywhere.
Now, Javier Milei, that's a politician that I can cheer for.
Is really awe-inspiring. These people are really dirty everywhere, not just my country. You may know about that, but
don't get me wrong. I see the hatred for Biden, the Democratic establishment, the Republican establishment. I'm certainly no Biden supporter, but I just don't understand these people that are like going to Trump rallies, and doing the January 6th stuff. Like, what is their motivation?
The one thing that the people in power, and I don't just mean in Washington in our government, I mean in our financial centers and entertainment centers. Our country's kind of cool because they're identified by cities. So Los Angeles, New York, Washington make all the decisions, of course. And the one thing they won't tolerate is the orange man in power. And you you wonder, well, why? Because Trump is not a radical at all. And Trump's vision for America, this is an informed assessment of Trump, Trump's vision for America is like Studio 54 in 1978. Like, I'm serious. Trump really loved the country he grew up in. He really loved it, and he means it. He loved the people who live there. He loved its traditions, its weird little customs, its idiosyncrasies, and that's kind of what he wants. He doesn't want a brave new future of new things. He wants to return not to antebellum America, but to like 1980 America. And it's kind of hard to argue why that's bad, actually. And so that's not a revolutionary agenda, nor is it a counter-revolutionary agenda. It's a return to normalcy. And the phrase, make America great again, means return it to a period not so long ago, when everyone was enfranchised and everyone had rights, but everyone was roughly, not everyone, but most people were sort of united in a sense of common purpose and culture. They were Americans, and they knew what that meant. We don't have that anymore, and that's Trump's vision. So you may not think that's possible. You may not think maybe that's even virtuous.
That's brilliant. I've never heard it put that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
To want that. But if you think that's a grotesque hellscape that he's describing, you're the freak, not him. And yet they all feel that way. They mean it too. They really feel that way. It's not a joke. And so what's gonna happen? And I guess I dissent a little bit from the much
That's the thing, is the left is just so insane these days.
more optimistic view that you have, both of you, which I really appreciate hearing and I want to believe it, but that in the end, the will of the people matters. The conclusion that I've come to is that it matters less than it should. And that the people in power really do make the bulk of the decisions. And I say that after spending 35 years in Washington and watching the agenda of both parties and comparing that agenda to the public opinion polling of what people actually want and finding no union set. No union set. Like, there's not the same agendas. And we have a democratic system where these people are elected every 2 years in the Congress, every 6 years in the Senate, every 4 years in the White House. And their agenda never changes, and the desires of the American public, by and large, are never met or even addressed. And you sort of, after a while, conclude, maybe it doesn't matter what people want, it only matters what the people in power want. I don't want to think that, but I don't know what other conclusion to reach. So what you have now is a legit mass movement on behalf of Donald Trump that's 100% real, and you have absolute ironclad resistance to the democratic process working its way to a legitimate conclusion by the people who have all the power. What happens next? I don't even.
And this is, by the way, why the elites put so much emphasis on social issues. Because they couldn't care less about, gay marriage or abortion or anything like that. Immigration. What they care about is keeping the scam going, is enriching themselves at the expense of the public through the tax system. Everything else they don't care about. They'll go with the flow on so long as that one thing can keep going on.
And I'll sum it up this way. Today, it is a race in the foreseeable future between Donald Trump, the former president, now effectively the Republican nominee, and the incumbent president. He got more votes than Barack Obama somehow, because he's just so popular. It's just the magnetism. He spent the entire 2020 campaign moldering and deteriorating in his basement, and somehow he was more popular than Barack Obama. Right, okay.
Who, this guy? This guy senile? Literally can't even stand up.
Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
Accompanied by the Director General of the International Labor
Say to President Biden,
Republic of Brazil, by the Director General of the International Labor Organization.
and to say to President Biden, can you hear me, President Biden?
No.
This is a historical moment for Brazil and for the U.S. President Biden, can you hear me? You can? Yes, good. And so...
To be fair, that is a lot of